Mike Stanley and I made a film comedy about a community theater, and I wrote a part for Doug, a character called Arden Sherwood, who is a famous director.
Oh my God, you are Arden Sherwood.
You're a member of the group theater.
Oh, shit.
You know, I read your book.
Community theater out in the middle of nowhere. They have on the board this famous exiled Broadway director who they keep in the corner. Nobody really knows or cares about his accomplishments.
What the hell are we talking about?
Order.
I said, what the hell?
Out of order! The chair recognizes Arden Sherwood.
We filmed it at the Little Theater in Newtown, which legend said that Elia Kazan had once directed there. It's an apocryphal tale. I don't think there's any evidence that Elia Kazan ever set foot in the Little Theater. I mean, it was plausible because he did live in Newtown, and just down the road, Pinewood Lake, where the group theater did have a summer retreat.
So, what are your thoughts on opening night, Mr. Sherwood?
Up yours.
Arden Sherwood is everything that Doug is not. He's an egotist, he's bitter, he's an alcoholic.
You people with your degraded tastes and bourgeois sensibilities make me sick.
I knew that Doug knew people like this, and in fact, he said he did, and he was able to draw on this character, and then he played it to the hilt. I'm afraid that I also included inside jokes that I thought that Doug would appreciate.
I once asked Sandy Meisner.
Oh God, not another Meisner story.
What'd you ask him?
Sandy, why do we take our make-believe so seriously?
What did he say?
We're make-believe. Why do we take ourselves so seriously?
My dear, if you hang around long enough, you'll hear from all of them. Strasberg, Stanislavski, Karnowski, Adam.
So many dead Russians.
I've seen a lot of actors who work with a method. They are totally into their character on and off. And one of the things that I liked about Doug was that the camera would go on, it would be action, and he would be in the moment right then and there. The camera would go off, and he'd be, hey, how was that? You know, it'd be Doug again. He said, you know, I have this idea, can I do this? And so we set it up, we set up the camera and everything, and he just went into this monologue from Shakespeare, and my jaw just dropped.
Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew. Or that the everlasting had not fixed its cannon against self-slaughter! Violent! Ah, fie! 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross and nature possessed. Merely spare me. Spare me. Spare me.
It was, you know, he's a talented writer, but as an actor he's really gifted. I guess he's gifted in many ways, you know, so acting wise there was never any time I felt like I had to say try it this way or bring it down or bring it up. It was always, he was spot on.
In fact, it was Elia Kazan who once said, as a director, if you get an actor trained by Meisner, you're blessed.
It was back in the early 50s. I lived in a cold water flat. I'd moved from one that cost $5 a month upstairs to a fancy one that cost $35 a month. Anyway, right in that period, I began to sell TV scripts. I was always fascinated by what was going on my street. It was East 54th Street, over near the river. And this bus pulled up, this yellow bus. It was kind of an old bus. It was transporting girls to the across the street where I used to go periodically for a shower and a swim. What happened was that these girls had all gotten out of the bus and gone inside, except somehow, I guess one of them got away and ran. I didn't see her running away. What I saw was our street cop. He was bringing this girl back to one of the attendants who was in white, all dressed in white, and the girl was in tears and crying. There was something about her and what was going on with her that I couldn't get out of my mind. I kind of like, I don't know, when I think back on it, I feel like I fell in love with her, just watching her, and I identified so deeply with her plight. I knew she wanted to get away and escape whatever was going on. And so eventually I sat down and I started to write this film. I said to myself, what would have happened if she got away?
It was about the time that we were shooting Agatha. Doug told me that he had a screenplay he wrote. He started writing back in the 50s, and he showed it to me.
The first title was A Girl Who Stamped on Air, and it came from a poem by Emily Dickinson. Of course I cried. Did God care? He cared as much as if a bird on air had stamped its foot and cried, give me. Then it became A Girl on Air, then it became Naomi, and eventually, more recently, it became Naomi's Journey.
And she gets to Coney Island, and there she sort of hides in plain sight.
I did not have a planned script in my mind. Why is she in Coney Island? Because that's where she went, and I went there with her.
Of useful insight, I think, into Doug was just that momentary inspiration, something that strikes him, a scene that struck him on the street in New York City, that haunted him and that inspired him to create a story that explained it. And he just let his imagination take him where it wanted to go. To shoot this was beyond us, but I thought we'd get some actors together that we knew, and I would at least shoot some scenes. After being assaulted, she's rescued and taken in by a young man and his aunt, who runs an Italian restaurant.
Why don't she go home?
Took her home. They don't want her.
What's that mean?
Means her stepmother's a cockroach and her father's a jellyfish. Stepmother slammed the door in her face.
So you like being a waitress?
I like Olive Body. She's different. She likes people.
So lots of people like people.
Name me a couple.
You know, you're right about Olive Body. She's A1 the best. I'd hate to see anyone make a sucker out of her. So why didn't your stepmother want you around?
Because I'm a cannibal.
Huh?
I eat people.
No, you're not so tough. You just pretend to be tough.
You've been watching me or something?
Oh no, I've just got hunches.
Well, swell for you.
Naomi becomes involved with the young man, and she finds out that he's involved with a woman who's married and wealthy.
I'm Ann Carter. Pete works for my husband. Do you remember me? I'm
Ann Carter.
Oh, how nice of you to remember.
I named my doll after you.
Did you? Well, I'm flattered.
But I renamed her Penelope.
These guys I pilot around on Carter's boat, they haven't made. You can tell, fat cats, sit back, make deals, smoke Havanas out to here.
You want to be a fat cat?
Me? Hell no, that ain't my scene.
I was wondering.
I was just talking. What's wrong with just talking?
Depends on what you say.
You know, you really get the guy going, you know that?
I'm just reading my book. I'm innocent.
Innocent. Who's Balzac?
Balzac.
Balzac. Why was Anne so surprised you were reading him?
Maybe because he wrote it so long ago.
How long?
About 100 years.
You were reading a book that was written 100 years ago?
Well, I'm trying to, but if you keep talking at me, it could take me 100 years to finish it.
Oh, excuse me for a living.
I don't know what's with that swanky chick, okay? But if you're so curious, don't ask me. Ask her the next time you're...
Next time I'm what, huh? Didn't I tell you that... You're jealous of her or something?
Jealous? What makes you think I even care enough to be jealous? But if I did care, you know what I'd say? I catch you with her again, I'll cut your eyeballs out. But I'm not the jealous type.
How come you read so damn much?
Makes me feel close to my mother. She used to read to me every night of my life till I was 8.
Then what happened?
Then she died.
She was a teacher, right?
Right. She was a teacher.
She has a line in the film when the matron that finds her on Coney Island has her rearrested. She eventually says to her, "You've changed, haven't you?" And Naomi says, "Yes, I've changed. I'm not the same person I was at all. I didn't know who I was. I found people who loved me."
I mean, the screenplay ultimately was his gift to that woman he fell in love with on the street.
I've never fallen out of love with her. You know, she's there on the paper, and I sometimes think it's. Sometimes wish that girl that tried to get away knew that she inspired a film.
Working class setting, the characters. That seems to be the kind of people that you write about.
I'm trying to think now that you put it that way, you know, in terms of a class that I write, you know, but maybe basically I do. See, I grew up in a depression, and I was a part of a society that was struggling to re-find itself, you know, to escape from the horrors of the depression. My family, fortunately, always had enough for us to get by on, but we were very economical. I remember once I got a doctor's bill. They sent a doctor's bill because I broke my arm. I hardly ever went to the hospital to see a doctor. And a doctor came to, that they knew. My father was a bowler, and he knew this doctor, and he asked this doctor to come down and check and make sure my arm was okay after they'd said it and all that. And he did, and then he sent a bill. And I don't think that they took him out for a drink afterwards. I don't think they expected to have a bill from him. But my father came back and said he sent a bill. I don't know what the exact words were. And my mother said, "How much was it?" And he said $5. And my mother went, "That was a lot of money to us. A lot of money." So I grew up in that period and came out of it with the rest of the country. And I don't know. I guess I've always identified with that class of people that were struggling.
I love watching the gulls glide and soar. They're scavengers, but there's something about them. And they have dignity, my mother would have said. I remember once hearing her in school talking about dignity, how important it was to have it.
I think that he is carrying on the American Romantic tradition, the commitment to democracy and progress and equality, drawing inspiration from nature and from ordinary people. American Romanticism really gained steam leading up to the American Civil War. There was a struggle to decide what America was. The physical country, the artistic country, the literary country, the philosophical country. The whole notion of God was up for grabs in the 1850s. The writers that seem to have inspired Doug the most are writers from that period. After World War I, we get the same kind of reversion to questions of what the country is, what humanity is, what should we believe in, what political system is the best system, who is the common man, what's the most important value to drive a person. And then we get that after World War II. We get it during the Vietnam period as well. Recurrence to looking for an anchor and looking for a destination.
I want you to share the story that's in that play that has the March in Washington embedded in it. What's the name of that play?
All right, Jack.
That's a game, Jack?
Yeah. That's the game, Jack.
Yeah. Tell us about that, because you talk about, there's a character in there that I know is you taking that bus.
Well, he was, at that moment when I wrote that, it was me saying that, you know. I'm closer to being the lead character than, because he was a secondary character, but a strong character in the play. Using yourself is very important in playwriting. I don't know that I ever wrote a play that I didn't really identify with emotionally.
Tell us about where you were when Martin Luther King gave that speech.
Frankly, the speeches that were being made were interesting, but they were just speeches, you know. I began to work my way through the crowd and around the side of, you know, going toward the Lincoln Memorial, because Lincoln Memorial was out there in front of us, and there was platforms there with mics and all that, and I worked my way around behind, and when he gave that speech, I was sitting under Lincoln's statue, right? Nobody else was there. I was there, but I could hear the speech, of course. Also, I looked over on my side at one point, and there was a door, and that door opened, and a couple of three people walked out, and one of them was Marlon Brando, and he was dressed, oddly enough, in a brown suit and tie, which I had never seen him in. I saw him on the stage numerous times. But there he was, Marlon Brando, standing there, and they were saying to him, I think they were indicating to him, that it would be all right if he went up on the platform. And he just shook his head no, and left. So anyway, I was sitting there, you asked me that question, I was sitting there when he said, I have a dream.
You recognized right away that it was different from the other speeches that you were hearing?
It just grabbed everybody. It just grabbed that crowd of thousands of people out there. It just grabbed him, and he just held them spellbound, and their reaction to it, of course, was tremendous. I don't think any of us realized the significance of what had happened in Washington, because it was suddenly fabulous. Everybody was talking about this March on Washington, where we were. And my then wife was in a play. She was a brilliant actress. She was in rehearsal for a play. And she, with great pride, said, my husband was there, you know. And I mean, we were there because we felt it was important to be there, but we had no idea that it was going to sweep the country, and had swept the country in terms of reaction to it. Why are we going on with this thing? Oh, you asked me about the play. Oh, yes.
He has a social consciousness, and it is very clearly coming through as the common man working to find his place in this greater universe, and finding the balance, within that is where he's, that's a theme.
One of the things that's interesting about writing, and also acting, is that you discover things about yourself when you're writing that you never knew existed. And that same thing is true of the acting technique. For example, Louise, she decided she wanted to try to write something, and she wrote this kind of fantasy thing. Her immediate family at that point thought it was funny that she was trying to write something, and they laughed at her doing it. But she showed it to me. It was not very good, but it was there. And so I encouraged her to write something else and to go on writing. And she became a writer. Now, she never would have become a writer if she hadn't been in that workshop and studied that technique, because she had 14 books published. She had a lot of things happen to her as a writer. She's now an editor, and people bring their novels to her to edit. Did she have this going on before she came and studied the method? No. The method put her in touch with herself, with aspects of herself that she never knew existed. And that's called the creative process. And emanating, eventually, what we call spiritual overtones. And Sandy calls it that. But very few people, I think, understood that aspect of the technique. And that is that it brings you so involved in what you are doing, and so using yourself so fully and with such tremendous concentration that you emanate spiritual overtones because you are totally involved in what you are doing. And that applies also, I think, to writing. The characters and you have merged into this form. And that's the creative process. And of course, emanating spiritual overtones, which I don't think Stanislavski ever used that phrase. I think that's Sandy Meisner's phrase. But it was just an avenue of approach. And everybody has to make it their own, so that their inner creative self, which is in every single person, emerges.
When you think about his background, he's so humble. I just don't know how he does what he does. I hadn't studied with him for a couple years, so I go back to the Crystal Theater. And I'm a little bit older, a little bit more life experience. And he yet pulls more out of me that was in there that I didn't even know was in there.
I stayed with Doug for about 4 years, and then I got accepted to the USC Film School. I went away to California. Had a whole career in TV for 15 years. And then I moved back to the East Coast, and I thought, what if Doug Taylor is still teaching acting? I called him up, and Doug was going strong. And now he had a whole new cadre. And Doug has probably mentored, I would say easily in the hundreds of people?
Most people that I was in there with, were not actors before, and I've never really considered myself an actor since, and so he's always made me feel very, very welcome. A number of years ago, in the middle of one of our acting semesters, my father was diagnosed with cancer, and during that time, the firm that my father had started with two partners was celebrating its 30th anniversary with about 800 guests at the Museum of Modern Art, and my father had asked if I would go there and speak in his place. And so off I went to go and speak in front of 800 people, which I had never done before. But I found that when the moment came, I didn't really have any issues with it because of what Doug had taught us in class, and the poise and the presence and the ability to be in the moment that I had learned in his class, and that he had also always taught us that that acting was really doing. And I realized that if acting was really doing, then doing was really doing. And if I went and acted like a woman who knew what she was going to say and was comfortable speaking in front of 800 people, then I was going to be a woman who was comfortable in front of 800 people, and it really worked.
Early in the classes, he said something, pretty much every class, he would say the same thing as he was critiquing scene work mostly. He would say to people, don't put the life there. And we all took what meaning we took from that in terms of the acting, which is of course very important, about being in the moment and being natural, and all the other things that fall into that about not putting the life. But I took it more as a life instruction, and I use it as my primary advice in life. If you're looking at choices in your life, or you're at a crossroads, or you're making a decision about what you want to do in your life, you just don't put the life there. You find what's true, and you go with that.
The poem that's central to the play, The Re-Education of Horace Johnson, is part of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. It's a small section that begins, "The spotted hawk swoops by me." And generally it's often discussed as a separate poem. But I think maybe I can use it as a way to talk about what seems to be Doug, for me anyway, when I learn about his childhood and his development and his education. It seems as if there was something waiting for him. He talks about going to school to become a lawyer and then realizing that was the wrong thing to do, and then taking some literature classes and suddenly feel as if he's discovered what's important to him. And the last line of the Spotted Hawk section says, "I stopped somewhere waiting for you." And it's almost a feeling that Doug's life was waiting for him to step into it. I think it's kind of a teacher's mission. Even a not very effective teacher sometimes hits that magic student, that student who's waiting, who needs him or her. An effective teacher hits most of the students in the class to one extent or another. And he may be remembered because he taught me how to sit down on stage, how to find my chair and sit in it, or he may be remembered because he introduced me to a certain kind of play, or he may be remembered because he changed my life, because something that he said, or just the way that he acted with me, the way that he treated me, made me see the world in a different way. Not just made me understand how to come through a door, but made me see the world in a different way and my place in the world in a different way. And when that happens with a student, that student will refer to that teacher again and again and again. Not only has the teacher had a shaping of influence on the student, but that teacher is remembered. Now, I've had professors who have quoted their professors. And when I quote my professors, I say, and he said then, referring to one of his teachers, you see, every piece of that influence is carried along and then is transferred and translated by the person who's influenced. So a teacher, an effective teacher, may wind up being remembered either as a person or as an idea for generations. That piece is a living thing, and it's passed forward, and it incorporates itself with other parts of the person who remembers, and then that's passed forward. Teachers are the only people who live forever. That's my idea. Now, Doug seems to be willing to, and I think it would be wonderful if he did live forever as well. But in terms of the lives that he's touched, and genuinely touched, not come into contact with, but generally touched, he's all over the place. And a lot of those people are in positions where they can pass that insight or that intimacy or that vision or that character trait forward into another generation, some of whom will pick it up and take it forward still more.
The spotted hawk swoops by and accuses me. He complains of my gab and my loitering. I too am not a bit tamed. I too am untranslatable. I sound my barbaric yarp across the roofs of the world. Failing to fetch me at first, keep encouraged. Missing me one place, search another. I stop somewhere, waiting for you.